Okay, guys, listen, so when I first started playing lacrosse, I was 11 years old, and I drove 90 miles to Syracuse University for my first lacrosse game. It was the year 1988. These guys I heard of, the Gait brothers, who were twins, they're huge, 6'3", over 200 pounds, and they ran fast, and they had the best stick skills. Between the legs passes, behind the backs, around the worlds, catching over their head, flinging it to the next guy. They had this really awesome swagger about them, this really amazing confidence. And from that day forward, I wanted to play at Syracuse University, and I wanted to be Gary Gait.
Now for the first time, Syracuse has sent on one of their Canadian twins, number 38, Gary Gait, out of Brentwood Bay, British Columbia.
The first time I heard the Gaits was when we played, Hopkins played at Syracuse in an early game in their freshman year. And you'd have to confirm this, but I think they wore like number 36 and 39 or something like that. Nobody knew about 22 and 19.
The Gait brothers, we said freshmen getting some early playing time for Syracuse out of British Columbia.
Gait close, one of the Gait brothers with a great fake, and he scores. That's number 38, Gary Gait, with his first U.S. college goal.
The Gait's arrival in the winter of '87, I believe in January, came as almost a gift to Coach Simmons.
Well, I was a bad boy in 1978. Canada has a rule when they sponsor a national team that before the team goes off to play, and the team was going to England that year, you have to perform in front of the Premier. And the Premier lives in Ottawa, pretty close to Syracuse, across the border. So I got a call from the national coach of Canada. Bobby Allen's his name, well known in Canada as a coach. And he was coaching the Canadian national team. He had John Grant, Mike French, John Cockerton, all the now famous people. And he had to play a team, so he called me, realizing I was close to the Canadian border. Could I get a team together to come up and scrimmage them? So I went up with a pickup team from kids around the summer that were here for summer school or high school. And I went up and we played the Canadian national team and beat the hell out of them. He said, boy, we got a lot to learn in a short period of time.
Bobby Allen had a great relationship with Roy Simmons at Syracuse because Syracuse was really a team that had helped the Canadian development of the Canadian national team program. So Bobby had taken the national team down to Syracuse to play exhibition games and had tapped into Roy's expertise in the development of the game.
Roy said, I don't care where you're from. You could be Canada, Uganda, you're playing lacrosse, you're more than welcome.
Got in trouble with some of the American coaches. They felt that I was a turncoat, that I was helping Canada. Bob Allen said to me, I owe you. You know that phrase, when you do something nice for somebody, they say, I owe you one. I said, yeah, okay, good luck. A couple of years later, I got a call from him, and he said, I got identical twins from Victoria, and they'd love to come to Syracuse. They heard me talk about you. They know about Syracuse lacrosse. They'd love to trade their talent for an education.
Like Coach mentioned, he got that call, and we went up and watched them, had some fun, and Paul would run people over, and Gary would run around people, and they were already 6'2", 190-pound athletes, and bigger and stronger than most players that we had seen and recruited. So Coach asked him to come, and thank goodness he did.
And I think it was the summer of '83, we got invited while in high school to go try out for the Canadian national team. And that's, I thank Chris Hall, who was my coach and teammate for the field lacrosse team that we played for out in British Columbia. And, he talked to Bobby and convinced Bobby, you got to give these two kids a shot. I think they got a shot of making this Canadian national team. They're really young, but I think they're very talented.
I guess maybe we're a little bit hesitant at the time to bring 15-year-old teenagers to play with a men's team that was 21 and older. But, when obviously we watched them and their skills, and physically they were incredibly mature and big and strong. Even at 15 years old, they were much different than other athletes their age. And so certainly skill-wise, we knew they were more than capable of playing with men. So that was the first opportunity I had of really building a relationship with Paul and Gary and really watching their marvelous talents.
Didn't make the team, and later, Bobby's like, you should have made the team, but you were so young, I knew you'd have plenty of opportunities. So, and he, maybe if we made the team, he wouldn't have been able to do that favor.
After I saw them, I thought I was a lucky guy. I wasn't really taking a chance.
Here's one of the Gait brothers. He's big. And his shot is saved. Now to Paul Gait, number 39. He shoots, he scores. And they go to Gary Gait coming in. Hard shot, score. Quick release by Gary Gait.
And they got an assist from Gait, so the Gait brothers making an impact as freshmen here.
Which Gait was it?
38.
It's Gary Gait.
Yep, they're twin brothers.
And he got the pass near midfield. Here he comes. And he shoots and scores again.
Freshman making a contribution early.
When they first got there, doing their little tricks with their left hand and never putting the stick in their right hand, and that's taboo. You have line drills, go left, go right, do this, that. They basically said, well, this is what we know how to do, and this is the only thing we're gonna do. And they kind of threw a different element of lacrosse, which we honestly never saw.
7-1. Gait off the isolation, scores.
There's the shot, left-handed.
A little bit unusual. He went to his right and still shot it left.
For us as field coaches in the United States, we had to get used to the one-handedness of the Gaits. They're both left-handed, didn't put it in their right hand a lot. And we actually, that was one thing we had to get used to.
Behind the backs, the way they just unorthodox, compared to an American style play that we hadn't really seen yet.
Here comes Paul, working one-on-one. He blows by a man, switches hands and scores.
It looks so unorthodox. That doesn't look like that shot should have gone in the way he changed hands. They take shots that looks unorthodox, and unorthodox or not, got into 36 square feet.
I think we took that international style and merged the box across, and that's what everybody I was playing against did. I was never really thinking about, I need to learn to develop a right hand when I was young, but boom, get to Syracuse, everybody's all right, right-handed this, left-handed that, just started in warm-ups, all these different, skills that you had to do both left and right-handed, and I was like, holy cow, this is pretty intense. These guys are all pretty good with both hands. You may be able to do things left, right, but the game's about making the play, putting the ball in the back of the net.
After they came and practiced and we started getting used to the style of play, everything made a lot of sense. Instead of switching hands, to make a pass, they'd catch it and make a pass and just throw it behind their back. And at first it was difficult to say, no, we don't do that. That's not what we do here in field lacrosse. And they said, why? I can get it there quickly, and everything was right on the stick when they made passes. So we kind of learned from them.
You just sensed, wow, they were pretty good, and then fast forward to the end of that year, I think their semifinal was against Cornell, and that's when you knew that it was real. I think Gary scored like 5 or 6 goals, at the end of his freshman year.
They were such a unique story in, the twin aspect was intriguing, the Canadian aspect was intriguing, the talent was, just off the charts.
I guess they don't count unless you go behind your back.
Well, that's just the Canadian way of doing things.
They came in like gangbusters and had a different approach and style to the game of lacrosse that whether you emulated it or not, you had to love it.
Paul had a better outside shot, stationary outside plant shot, and I was better, dodging and shooting. So those were kind of the little differences. He was a power player. He'd run through people. I'd try and deke and go around them or dodge them, and a little bit more finesse. But you know what? We just both tried putting the ball in the net, making plays, and playing good lacrosse.
They weren't afraid of failure. They were willing to take chances. Their size helped them a lot. Unique for lacrosse. They're well over 200 pounds and strong, very strong.
You see, when Gary Gait is so strong, Dale, and he gets planted, he's immovable.
The fantasy they had worked. A lot of underhanded shots between the legs, behind the back. I couldn't eliminate that because that was them. And it made the game more exciting and more winnable.
Really not overstating it, but the Gait brothers have done for the sport of lacrosse what Michael Jordan has done for pro basketball.
For the first time I ever saw him play, Gary Gait jumped from behind over the top of the net and dunked it from behind. And anybody know what that's called?
Air Gait.
It's called the Air Gait. Uh-oh. For Gary! That's a 38-year-old version.
I remember that in practice right out on Coyne Field, and I was standing there. I just came walking out to watch practice, and we're watching, and all of a sudden he pulls this move off, and I'm standing next to Kevin Donahue, and I looked at Kevin, and I said, what the hell was that? Like that, right? Is that legal? And I said, is that legal? And Kevin goes, well, we'll find out, I guess.
Well, I'd seen him do it in practice, not in scrimmage. I'd seen him fooling around on the other end of the field, and I thought, well, it's pretty far-fetched, and he'd probably never try it in a game.
Penn was playing really well in that game, and they probably should have won. I don't know if Syracuse was flat or they were kind of looking past Penn, and Tony Seaman was coach at Penn there, and the goalie, I think Lopez was the goalie, he was having a really good game.
And I'll never forget the play because I was always a vocal, pain in the ass kind of a guy out on the field. And I remember watching us work the ball around, and Gary fumbled the ball behind, and I took 2 steps out of my goal and started to yell down the field, you guys better get something going.
And then all of a sudden, Gary Gait gets it from behind the cage, and Penn thinks they have it defended perfectly, and all of a sudden he jumps from behind.
Gary Gait spins out in front. Oh, what a goal by Gary Gait! He jumped over the net, put it in from behind. Gary Gait just made the nicest goal I've ever seen.
All of a sudden, we look up and he does it in the game, and the whole crowd just stopped. It was almost like a moment of silence.
At first, half the crowd kind of cheered, but the other half was just kind of looking around, waiting for somebody to say, you can't do this.
I was literally behind in the entranceway, went behind where Gary jumped over the cage, and I saw it, and I was like, that's illegal.
And if you watch it the first time, if you just watch the referees, they didn't even know what to do.
They were in deep trouble late in that game. And I really think, quite honestly, watching that game live right there, that was a turning point to get them in a tight spot to beat a very good Penn team.
Had we lost that game, we were out of the playoffs. We did win that ball game, and we went into the final game, and 2 days later, we beat Cornell for the national title in the Carrier Dome. So this was part of a championship weekend where Gary did something that nobody had ever seen done.
Don't Air Jordan around those times, and lacrosse didn't get a lot of media attention, so the media picked it up a little bit, and this was an easy blurb to write about. He's redefining the game, he's jumping from behind the goal, he's Superman, that sort of thing. You go to camps and stuff, you see little kids trying to do that.
That was obviously a move that I saw live that I was like, that's kind of Syracuse lacrosse. You don't see that from any other program, and that's what makes Syracuse lacrosse different.
Yeah. Oh, nice move. Air Gait. And he came down inside.
He's smiling though as it comes off.
You gotta love it, as do the fans. This game is entertainment. Like all sports, it's entertainment, and boy, you don't get much more entertainment on a Syracuse University lacrosse.
They've put in some new wrinkles that we didn't think possible. I think they've created a lot of interest from young kids' standpoints. They're actually real heroes. It's something that we've never seen in this game before. We were kind of generic in a way. But I think right now, the young kids in America have heroes in Paul and Gary Gait.
Everywhere we went, someone wanted a piece of them. They were really the first stars. There was so much going on around Gary and Paul, and they changed the landscape, and they changed the exposure that lacrosse got.
They were this sort of prototype athletes that kind of changed and revolutionized the sport and sort of broke down all those traditional walls.
Well, I think it just, gave the sport a real shot in the arm. I mean, they were so talented, and people would show up to watch them play. And in most cases, watch Syracuse win with them.
They lost about 3 seconds. So Birdie to Gary Gait. Syracuse has not had a shot. Gait fires, goal! What does this victory mean in the way it was accomplished?
Well,
I would have liked to win by more, but knowing that we could come back and our defense could hold them, I think we can hold any team in the country now with our defense. They're playing so well. And we just got enough opportunities that we managed to put one home.
We may never see one more exciting than that one. Congratulations to you, Gary.
Thank you very much.
The man who had the winning goal for Syracuse right there, Gary Gait.
The program was great prior to the Gates. It became the program during the Gates and after the Gates.
If you watch Syracuse from when the Gates got there to 96, probably 7, everyone kind of started having that same. Brooke Chase started looking like him. Like a lot of guys started adapting to that style.
How about almost behind the back passes? Is it hard to figure those? It seems like it can come from anywhere.
They keep me on my toes. I don't even see it coming half the time. I'm always expecting something different from Gary.
I remember Paul Gait in a championship game throwing a behind the back pass. Probably 30 yards to Greg Burns. It was amazing that someone could throw the ball running full speed with that kind of accuracy. I just thought, well, that's the best pass I've ever seen.
It happened, and you know, you kind of caught yourself, and you're like, wow, that was an unbelievable play. You know, and here we are competing against them for the national championship, and you're admiring something they did. To this day, I don't think I've seen a better pass.
You know, they could draw the double team, and you could triple team them. They could still get rid of it.
Gait behind the back. It's in. He didn't even see that ball until it was coming back out of the net.
I don't think you could prepare for Gary and Paul. I really don't. I think there was just something. They were big, they were athletic, you couldn't get their stick, and that goes on almost to this day.
The beauty of it was that not only was there one of them, but there happened to be two of them that were equally as good and equally as powerful and equally as agile and equally as talented and equally as creative.
The face, Gary to Paul Gait, he's got shooting room. Score!
The greatest player I've ever seen play the game is Gary Gait, without question, and Paul was probably that much behind him. No midfielder had ever scored 50 goals in a season before Gary Gait, and he scored 70 as a sophomore, and his brother scored 51, and they were both on the same midfield line.
There were so many good games in the 80s between us that it was, you know, I think at some point it became a pretty heated rivalry.
10 times these two schools played in the 80s, and 5 of those games were decided by 1 goal. It could be another very close game.
I think we all reveled in, well, we're more disciplined than them, and I think they reveled in, well, we're not as disciplined as them.
You could see that entire year. You know, both teams knew that they're on a collision course, and it raised the level of Dave's play and practice, and I think made him the excellent defender it is. Knowing that Gary was out there set a new standard offensively that Dave had to keep pace with, and that was beautiful to watch that.
I certainly got it against other teams as well, but none quite like playing, you know, the Gates, and certainly Gary and I wound up matched up against each other quite a few times. Practice was different for me that week. There was a little bit more of an edge, a little bit more of a focus.
At Petronella, shoots and he scores.
Petronella was left all by himself along the side. He came down with that big defensive stick, took the left-handed shot.
I never got nervous playing. I loved playing, but I was always excited to be able to try to measure myself by him or against him. The impact of the '89 game, you know, is kind of immeasurable. If I had $1 for every person that had said to me, you know, that was the game that really hooked me on lacrosse. That might have been a game that hooked me on lacrosse.
Rodney Dumpson, at the end of the day, basically won the national championship for him in 1989. He hit, you know, 2 goals in the 4th quarter, both on extra man. He was the guy we wanted to get the shot. Obviously, we're not going to let the Gates beat us on extra man. We shifted the defense, and Dumpson, I'll never forget, he takes a shot, boom, offside pipe. I hear it, and then I hear the crowd cheer, knowing that the ball, you know, ricocheted in off the pipe and into the goal. So he hit the perfect shot, basically the game winner. Paul was the star that day in '89, but Dumpson was spectacular as well.
I think that's part of the reason why this rivalry has been so great. There was this yin and yang, the great offensive players against the disciplined defensive group, very free-spirited and you know, creative coach against the disciplinarian. It had all the makings.
Syracuse, Roy Simmons, John Desco have defeated Johns Hopkins.
Here in Baltimore, he was made out to be like Darth Vader. There was the Baltimore way to play lacrosse at Johns Hopkins, and then there was Syracuse. And so it was, in our minds, it was good versus evil. I'm sure in their minds it was the same evil versus good or good versus evil as well.
In '90, I think they had something that they hadn't had before, which was just an extraordinary high level of confidence coming off of the '89 game.
The '90 team, that team had the whole thing. It had not just the talent, but the chemistry, the confidence, and about as comfortable as you can get in college, in that it's not a pro team where you have the same guys for 7 or 8 years. You know, college is the beauty of a college team is it's a snapshot. You only have, you know, I played in 42 games here.
Everybody knows that the 1990 team was the best team in the country, not only that year, but maybe ever. And that's saying a lot.
You turn to 90 and you know that they bring back a lot more than we do. And how are we gonna muck this up and upset Syracuse? And we went up there and it wasn't gonna happen. You know, their offense just was relentless. Expecting to weather the storm at halftime, saying, okay, we got through the hard part. And then the storm just got worse and worse and worse. They had that type of offense that year.
I remember 1990, the Gait's final year at Syracuse, when they absolutely smoked Loyola in the national title game. That was a team for the ages. It was the best lacrosse team I've ever seen. In covering the sport and being a fan for the last 30 years, I've never seen a team like that. I've never seen individuals on a field collectively like that.
Everyone remembers the Gaits, but they had, you know, they had 10 All-Americans probably on that team.
Gives off to Cahey with the left-hand cradle. Palin right in front of the net. There's a shot. A score! A goal by the goalie, Mac Palin! Oh, my!
Then they had some nice pieces around him. Greg Burns is a guy that I have a tremendous amount of respect for, just as a shooting attackman. And he was the perfect fit for those guys. Both being lefties, they'd operate on that left wing, and there was Burnsy on that right wing to catch any feeds. And that was the ultimate symbiotic relationship, because that kid could really shoot it.
Coast to coast comes Gary Gait. He feeds the crease, the fake. A score on the play off the feed by Gary Gait. And it was Greg Burns who got the goal.
Pat McCabe is an elite Hall of Fame defender who I played against growing up on Long Island, and a guy who was extremely skilled, smart, great with the ball. He's a world-class defender, always was at every level. He could make good offensive players look silly.
Pat McCabe, master of the poke check takeaway.
And then Steve Scaramuzino was a guy that I have a lot of respect for, the way he could run the field. He played with great energy.
Crossfield intended for Scaramuzino. He gets it, he comes in, he scores.
Schluter was another guy who made a huge play in the national championship game.
Here comes Schluter. Schluter all the way, and he scores. Phil Schluter gets...
Gary and Paul already knew about the chemistry of a team. They knew exactly what a team needed to win. And so when they came to Syracuse, they instilled that in all their players.
Those guys opened our eyes to another way of doing things. It didn't always have to be, you know, stick right up here and fundamentally sound and shoot the ball overhand, high to low, and there are other ways to score goals, and we found that out very quickly.
Well, I think the daring they had, you know, they weren't afraid of failure. They were willing to take chances.
You know, the coach let them play. And so the things they did, using one hand, things they did with passing behind the back and jumping over the net, air gating, they were allowed to do things that in many ways revolutionized the game.
We always used to say, and it was true, that you come to any practice and it's a lot more fun to watch one of our practices than the games, because that's where we developed all the shots, all the goals that you saw, that creativity. You'd come to practice and Coach Simmons would let us have fun with it.
The Syracuse style was so different, but Coach Simmons was so different. You know, it takes a pretty neat guy and a pretty strong guy to do some of the things he did, not worry about what the rest of the lacrosse world thought.
Here is Paul Gait, dishing it back to Dumpson. Better check your stick. That one looked like it went right through it.
And they were, without a doubt, you know, they emulated him. Those 3 years were great teams. They weren't good teams. They were great teams. And I think you can look at those teams and just, they're different. They were built differently, the talent level was different, and the level of success they had consistently.
Certainly from an hour away at Cornell, we knew that they were a good program.
As we get set for Cornell and Syracuse, always a traditional meeting, a rivalry here in upstate New York lacrosse.
This is the game for Cornell, so I'm looking for anything and everything. Pick.
Faking the shot, firing and scoring. It's a spirited Big Red team.
Back then, we certainly didn't like each other, that's for sure. We played a lot of games against each other, and we won some in '87, they won some in '88.
For him is intercepted. Goldstein down to Wurzberger. Pipe. Rebound is in. Meyer has his 6th goal.
At the end of the day, certainly 20-something years later, there's a lot of mutual respect.
And then we're going to look at Gait, Paul Gait, as he took a left-handed shot and got by Schmoller, one of the few times they really got to Schmoller. He's played an outstanding game for Cornell in the goal.
As great a players as they were, maybe you don't measure what they did just by their talents or their abilities, but maybe by the doors they opened and you know, and the kids they you know, they encouraged by their style of play to pick up the game and play it.
You watch players and you get that love for the game when they're, you know, 10 or 12 years old. And if you look at people who are 10 or 12 years older than a 10-year-old, those kids are playing in college. So it made perfect sense. It went from Gates to Powell's to Thompson's. And right now, the lacrosse world is being spoiled with a new influx of creativity from the Thompson brothers. But the Thompsons aren't the Thompsons, in my mind, without the Powells, and the Powells aren't the Powells, and it's not even close without the Gates.
I think what Gary and Paul did was they came and they made the world want to say, where did you find them? How do I go find some like that?
You know, I think Gary and Paul and Coach Simmons, and I think you have to put his name with them because he's the guy that allowed him to do it, and I'm not sure every coach would have done that.
I try to compare my style to Roy Simmons. You're talking about opposite worlds, you know, and just so, you know, so admiring of all the things of letting his kids play and letting them, you know, make errors, making them, you know, letting them do their thing, and yet people think that it was just a freelance go play playground ball. It wasn't. There was always a method to the madness. There was always a goal in mind. It was just he let the guys have some freedom so that they could get better.
In meeting him after college, I realized that, wow, you know, I would have loved to play for him. It would have been a great fit. You know, he gave guys the green light. He empowered people to make plays. He wasn't the type of coach to say, don't do that. He was the type of coach to say, next time you do that, it better work. But he was a positive leader and a guy who used real life examples to make points. He's a transformational coach for his student athletes.
The fear of failure controls a lot of things. And I told him, if you get knocked down, you got to get up. And if you make a mistake, I'm not going to yank you. You know, you will make mistakes, but then you will succeed also. We have a lot of sports here at Syracuse, and none of them have this kind of artistic flair, this kind of history. And we take up a great deal of this room. It's all history. It's to be repeated and emulated. So as you look around, you'll see lacrosse trophies, mostly. There is one basketball trophy and one football trophy, NCAA Championship. They both have one. We have 11. So we demand a little room.
You can't describe Roy. You know, I mean, he is such a special person. He's got it so much more together than the rest of us that, you know, it's, I just think it's amazing, and you see it very rarely when you have a man who can bring different worlds and different philosophies together in a coaching world where everybody's so result-driven.
Working with Coach Simmons, you know, for 19 years as an assistant coach, playing for him for 4 years, and then him, you know, literally seeing him almost on a daily basis for the last 35 years. I think the one thing that I've learned from him about lacrosse would be, in a word, creativity.
In my early years in coaching, Roy Simmons Sr., the old man, was the head coach. And then young Roy came along, and so I knew of him. And then the next thing you know, he's coaching, and you know, we had a good relationship. But the Simmons name in Syracuse is very, very meaningful, very special, that's for sure.
My dad came here in 24, 25, and was a baseball player. We learned lacrosse at Syracuse. because he liked the contact with the sport as opposed to raining out baseball games. And he played for a guy named Roy Cox, who started lacrosse at Syracuse in 1916. He was the first coach for 6 or 7 years. My dad was his assistant. Roy Cox moved on from Syracuse to be the president of New England College, and he left the team with my father in about 1928. And he was a coach until I took over in 1970. And I went from 70 to 98. So we've been pretty stingy about letting anybody in. We have almost 100 years between the two of us at Syracuse Lacrosse.
So I did a story for Sports Illustrated. I was suggesting Roy Simmons Jr. as a story just because he'd won the championship after so many years of Syracuse not winning, and his whole history with his father, and the fact that he was an artist more than the typical phys ed teacher coach.
He was just not a traditional coach. He was the artist, and he had the longish hair sometimes, and he didn't look like the coach from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. He was a much different kind of guy.
You knew the man a little bit, you knew the myth a bit, but then when you really got it full bore, you understood that he's kind of an eccentric type guy, kind of a free spirit. That was the way Syracuse lacrosse was played. It was free-flowing. It was individuality with a team concept, if that makes sense.
He wasn't from the sort of the typical mold of, the high school, the college coach, everything focused so on the ball game, winning. Roy just took it in stride.
Coach Simmy always wanted us to just go out and explore everything we possibly can and not just worry about the school and lacrosse. He wanted us to be men first, student athletes second.
Just the things that Coach Simmons taught us in terms of you're going to take on to later part of your life with your family, with your friends, and it was just, every time we're on the road trip, we're going to a museum, going somewhere where we're going to, learn about life.
There is a right brain, left brain separation in coaching. Right brain is not illogical, but it's asymmetrical. It allows for outside of the box thinking. He brought this concept of right brain thinking, and he permitted it on the field.
I try and emulate him as much as I can, as one of the greatest coaches ever, and it's difficult because you want more control.
In the off season, he would go to the Andes and he would study pre-Columbian Andean textiles. He might go to Africa and work with West African tribesmen on creating a better finish on a bench. This is in the off season while he's winning national titles.
At that time, I had not been to the Ivory Coast or Benin, but I understood the work. They call it African art. It wasn't made as art. It was made to be used ceremonially, but now it's called art, and now it's popular. What I was really doing was buying sculpture for friends, and when I came home, I had a ready-made market, and plus I bought extra, or I could sell out of my studio. So as a lacrosse coach, I was looking for an extra income and an adventure. And then I found that I started to really love the forms, and so it became a big part of my life. These are Tuareg pieces. A lot of Tuareg pieces. They're not old, but people wear them as jewelry. As you can see here, there's about 800 masks on this wall, and a wall behind us, another 800 masks.
He had an interesting perspective on the game. He looked at the game more as an artist would look at a canvas than a coach necessarily would look at a playbook. And he saw each player in play as kind of an intricate part of this wide or vast canvas.
We have to remember, how did Coach practice? What he did was he would roll the ball out and say, boys, paint me a beautiful picture. He would stand in the center of the field, whereas typical coaches would stand on the sideline or go into a practice scheme. He would stand in the center of the field, almost as if he was conducting a grand performance. It changed the way people dealt with failure. It changed the way people actually made decisions. The entire decision-making process was ramped up by virtue of the fact that he allowed for mistakes. And he actually told kids, I want you to live your dream.
Yeah, I think he's the greatest lacrosse coach that has ever lived, you know. Not just what he did on the field, but, you know, for his ability to recognize the players he had and make them the best and adapt his coaching style to the players and to elevate the level of everybody, and then to have the confidence in the players, not to overcoach and understand when the players can make good decisions and let them develop. And it's hard to be like that.
The word gets around that the coach is free-spirited. He knows the game, but he's not going to make you play a particular style that you're not used to. He doesn't penalize you for failure. And you can get knocked down, you can throw the ball away, but learn from it. I believe in trusting one another. He had to trust me and what my decisions were, where we're going to go, what we're going to do. And usually it worked out pretty well.
This is the little replica trophy that we get after we win or participate in the tournament in the NCAA. So this is a first place trophy for 1990, and unfortunately that 90 has been vacated with a little asterisk saying that we weren't the winning team that year.
The clock is ticking down with 4, 2, 1, and that is it. Let the celebration begin. Syracuse has done it. The Orangemen have accomplished three-peat. The word dynasty can now be thrown around for the Syracuse Orangemen, the 1990 lacrosse national champions. 21-9 is the final score of the championship game. Syracuse has done it.
There was a period in the 70s and 80s where there might have been a belief that car dealerships who were fans of a sports team might be providing impermissible benefits to student athletes, and they wanted those guys maybe to have cars because if the star athlete is driving around in that dealership's car, that may actually cause people to go to that dealership and buy from the same place. So I think a reporter could have been trying to determine whether or not, a student athlete suddenly was driving a really nice set of wheels, where that had come from.
The DMV is open to the public. They can't hide anything. You can go down there and look up anything you want. It's all in the books. Who owns it, who pays for it, or if there's a lien on it, and it's public knowledge. And Todd Leddy was down there. He's an investigative journalist. He's a hitman. He came to town, and as he's leafing through the DMV, trying to catch a glitch, he runs across Paul Gait and Kathleen Gait, which he knew. So he stopped there, and he saw the problem. Paul Gait and Kathleen were a married couple, lived off the campus, and needed a car. Paul and Gary, Mom and Dad wanted to sign it. They couldn't because they were Canadian. They needed somebody who had established credit. And they were from Canada, so they didn't have any friends here that had established credit. So they needed a signature that could be trusted with the bank that would indemnify the loan. Kathleen and Nancy, my wife, were friends, and so she wanted to help them out. She went to Victoria to their wedding. They're very close. It was a private thing between Kathleen and Paul. It had nothing to do with athletics. Nancy said, well, I could sign because I'm not involved. I'm a friend of Kathleen Gait, and they need help. They've tried everything they can, and they can't get help because they're Canadian. And Kathleen needed a car to go to the West Side where she had a job, which they had to have. They were a married couple. Paul couldn't work, he was in school. So Nancy said, I'm gonna help Kathleen out. And I never gave it another thought, because I had seen things that go on where cars are given, money is given, jewelry is given. I've seen NCAA infractions that curl your toes. No penalty like this.
When Gary and Paul showed up on campus,
they basically had a pair of jeans and a lacrosse stick, and they had nothing. And Paul Gait, at some point along the lines here, becomes a 20-year-old married man on campus, trying to make a life for himself and using the game of lacrosse to do that. And he's done very nicely in that capacity. But somewhere along the line, they needed a little hand up, and Nancy Simmons was kind enough to provide that, I guess. And there's no financial gain to anybody in that situation other than someone being a friend.
Well, to be honest with you, everybody had a relationship. We were one big happy family. So you love Coach, you love his wife Nancy, you love Desco, you love Cindy, one family.
Poor kids got nothing. She needed a job. You know, she needed a car to get to a job. And it was just a co-sign of a loan for a lousy $2,000 or something.
It was a shipbox car, as I remember.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And it was proven that, you know, all payments were made, you know, by the Gaits. And, you know, on top of it all, there was no rule in place.
I was doing the radio, and I'd flown up to Syracuse that day. And it was a night game. I think it was a Friday night. And one of the Syracuse papers broke this story about these allegations. It was sensational, and it sounded like it was going to be a big story.
The press got on the fact that Coach's wife and the whole situation, it wasn't nice. My wife's name was put on it all the time, and some journalists took advantage of her.
Well, first of all, the fact that Nancy would step forward and be helpful to a person in need makes all the sense in the world. That's who Nancy was. But for Nancy to be in the spotlight that those articles represented, I can't imagine the discomfort that she must have felt with that. I mean, that she would tarnish something that was so important to all the players and to Roy. I just can't imagine the depth of her pain.
She fit well with Coach Simmons. I could see why they were soulmates.
I think I would describe her as Coach Simmons would, as an angel, someone that was always there in spirit. You could tell she was an extension of Coach Simmons, and she loved us as much as, you know, Coach Simmons loved us.
Very nice, very, you know, in a way different, eccentric as well, from what I remember of her. She was a really, really, really good woman, and probably a great life partner for Coach, because Coach probably not easy to deal with at times too.
She was always her own individual. She did things, you know, her way when she wanted it, and you know, she did a very nice deed to help them out, and unfortunately, you know, the NCAA doesn't think that was the correct thing to do.
It was puzzling to me that when this article broke, nowhere in the article was there a quote from Coach Simmons. And so just as the newspaper had its ink and had its paper, I was able to videotape an interview and allow him to speak his mind. And it did ruffle some feathers.
I don't understand the whys of what he has to gain, except to be vindictive, and that's a bad word. And if we have to play with that in mind, vindictiveness and payback for something I didn't do, then I'm going to have to stand up and fight.
For a while there, Syracuse probably then got a little bit of a reputation as being a little bit of a rogue program, and kind of the reaction to it. You know, Roy Simmons was, you know, indignant and kind of refused to acknowledge the NCAA. And
the credibility of the source and who wrote it and how they wrote it and who they're disrupting is the thing that bothers me most.
My wife's name is on an infraction, which was wrong of them to judge. There was no rule in the books. They made the rule, which they are allowed to do. They're very capricious.
Well, I was hired as an enforcement representative, which is an investigator. We were the guys that were tracking down the briefcases full of cash and all those recruiting stuff. After about 5 years, I got promoted inside, and I was working on the rules and interpretation, helping the membership understand the rules. I'm sure in this instance there was a question about, well, we have a spouse of someone that normally is prohibited from doing something. Does that head coach particularly? Do the same restrictions attach to a spouse in a coaching situation? It's something like, if I can't do something by the rules, can I find cover by asking my wife to do something that was prohibited? And I think, in retrospect, if that question had come to me now, I'm not on the committee or something, but I think by and large, the quick response was, of course the rules apply. When you get to student athletes and cars, that's in the front of every coach's mind, and that's the kind of thing, this isn't some kind of obscure kind of concept floating around out there. This should have been something that should have been followed up on, and it wasn't.
I remember playing Hopkins when the NCAA was on campus as part of the investigation, and they wanted to speak with some of the players the day of the game, and coach wouldn't let them. They had questions they wanted to ask, so a lot of distractions, and coach kept them focused.
Beardsley over with the big stick defensively. Finn cranks it in close. And a little touch shot by Jamie Archer. That's his third goal in his first quarter. Syracuse closes out the regular season with a 21-17 win over Johns Hopkins. And now it's on to the NCAA tournament as Syracuse goes after yet another national championship.
When that all broke, we all realized that, this is where we play is a pretty big deal. And we were already pretty coherent as a unit in general. Some people are saying, the Gaits are gone. This is the end of, the era of Syracuse lacrosse. And then in '93, we win a championship again. And that put all that to rest. What happened in 1990 happened, and did I know all those guys? Did I know who did what? Sure, absolutely know them well. I'm one of those guys that's lucky, right? A four-year starter, you know all your alumni. That certainly does help bring a team together, and it doesn't hurt a team. So it had the adverse effect that probably maybe people wanted, and then we were able to play more as a unit, play more as a team, and went out that year.
Not their first midfield. Stolen by Beardsley. The ball is loose. Ground ball controlled by Syracuse. Reggie Thorpe passes ahead to
Watch
Schmidt.
the hit.
What a pass by Schmidt.
He's got Ryder.
Ahead to Matt Ryder. And Ryder shoots and scores! Syracuse ahead, 13-12.
I was told just before the 1993 championships that the following week it would be announced. But they didn't want me to read about it or see it on TV. They wanted me to know firsthand. But I stood there and boiled, knowing what was going to come.
It was hurtful. I felt, I felt bad for other players on that team. Felt bad for the Gaits, anybody that was associated with it, and all on a presumption of a rule. Kind of surprising that the NCAA would use presumption in their wordage. Most courts of law are very black and white. You either broke the law or you didn't. So for that word being used, presumption, a lot of gray area there. And then all of a sudden a rule is put in place the following year. There wasn't a rule violation for the year before. So, to use the word presumption, difficult to swallow.
The NCAA, in my estimation, is a cartel. They make the rules when they want to fit the situation, and then they enforce it. And it's not always correct. It's not always right. They did make a mistake. They're not going to own up to it.
In all honesty, if it had been addressed at the time, the question had been posed and answered, we wouldn't be doing this interview. There wouldn't be a story. There have been all kinds of stuff where you can fix it. You know, the problem was that it was, you know, in the darkness for all these years. You know? And then when it came to light, you can't unring that bell, whatever the outcome was. It's self-inflicted.
Winning a lot, you know, you're a target. Target for a lot of people that are not well balanced, they're improper. And organizations like the NCAA, they wanted a piece of flesh for it. And they saw the glut of trophies we had, and they said, we'll take one of those.
You know, I was thinking, you know, what are they going to do? Do they give the championship to Loyola? I mean, they destroyed Loyola. You're going to give them then? And I don't think many people thought that was that big a deal because, all right, it had been 3 years or whatever, and it didn't seem like a big transgression.
Other athletes right now, the Johnny Manziel signing autographs, you know, the Ohio State signing jerseys, you know, you can keep naming a lot of things. All that stuff going on, and ours is such a minute little thing.
Once you found out that it wasn't anybody cheating, you know, there was no guys playing that didn't have eligibility, there wasn't guys playing that didn't achieve their academic, you know, standards. There weren't guys playing that had played somewhere else for 5 years, or 30-year-olds, or whatever it might be. When you realized it was, you know, it was whatever, however you want to describe the error that was made. Honestly, I think it ranged from disbelief to whatever, to what a joke, you know, who cares?
They can't take away a championship that's won on the field. When we go on the air and say how many NCAA championships they've won, we count that number. Every graphic ESPN ever ran says they've won 11 national championships. The only people on the planet who don't recognize it are the people in Indianapolis.
I don't blame the NCAA. They have to have certain rules and certain standards, but there's not a lacrosse coach out there that would say, Coach Cottle, who was coaching Loyola at the time, who lost in that championship game 20-8, I believe, or something like that, is not going to say, I want that trophy. That would be the last thing that Dave Cottle would do. He doesn't want that trophy in any way other than to win the game. They won the game, and they were clearly better than anybody by far.
How can you take history away? It's like you can't take back what you said, right? Does that make sense? You can't take back that team in 1990 put a pistol whipping on Loyola. You can't take that back. It's on TV.
You know, it's part of life. You know, I've grown to accept it over the years. But I'll be honest with you, they can't take away the memories of what we did on the field.
They won it on the field. You can take away the trophy, but, you know, they were still the champs.
You know, for me, I don't focus on the asterisks because it doesn't mean anything. It's not there in my world. In my world, it's 1990 national champion Syracuse men's lacrosse.
We're not rear view mirror people. You know, we've done a lot of things since then, and you know, I think Simi would teach us that if you let their decision affect how you roll forward, then they win.
They don't look good in the eyes of a lot of lacrosse people. People realize that we're not bad. We're really not bad. Oh, it's not here. When it was announced that we were going to have to give up the trophy, they wanted the trophy back. So the athletic director told somebody to go over to the dome to get the 1990 trophy. The trophy case, which had a lot of memorabilia in it, had a lock on it. And it was in a special room that had a lock on the door. And then the Carrier Dome was very secure. There are cameras up and down every hallway. They know exactly where you are at any time. And lo and behold, the trophy wasn't there. So first things first, of course, they third-degreed me many days, thinking that if I didn't take it, who did? I would either know if I took it or I know who took it. And the only answer I ever had, and I still stick by it, is Friends of Syracuse Lacrosse were angry. This community was angry at the rule, the penalty, which was unjust, and they love their sport. We're going across the street to a cemetery. People park out here for football games and they walk through the cemetery to get to the dome. So So very often they will stop at my father's gravesite if they're older and know where he is, and they pay their respects.
When the NCAA came and they asked for the trophy back, and we told them that it was buried with old man Simmy. We don't have it anymore.
I knew you were going to ask me that. I don't know. I mean, I've heard rumors that it could be somewhere up in the Catskills in New York, somewhere deep in some bar or restaurant, or the other thing I've heard, it could be with Coach Simmons' dad, you know, somewhere underground.
I've heard that it was buried with his dad. I heard that it was buried with his wife.
It's kind of like the Jimmy Hoffa story. It's buried under the dome.
I heard that it's behind a wood stove down in the basement.
I have no idea. We've heard one that it's, you know, with Coach Simmons Sr. Across the road, not far away.
Yeah, I want to know what the trophy is. I mean, I think that's the most important, compelling question of us all. It's someone knows.
Do you know where the trophy is? I don't know where the trophy is.
Unsure.
I heard that it actually is sitting in a box in the house.
I would probably hide it in my wine cellar, right? And I'd go down there every once in a while and look at it and have a bottle of wine.
Hey, listen, my guess is the NCAA vacated it, so they must have it somewhere.
I've heard that it is in the trunk of a car.
I think someone stole it, and unfortunately, they're never going to give it back.
I have no idea. I wish it was in my house.
I've heard stories like other people, but I feel it's in good hands with the godfather of Syracuse lacrosse.
I think with this trophy, my suspicion is it's down in the grave. That's the perfect place for it.
Let it continue to live on as this myth, this legend. I don't think anybody's ever going to put their hands on it.
I'll guarantee you this, if it's still around, there's only one guy that knows where it is, for sure.
And he's too cool to tell.
Yep.
My best guess is it's somewhere, and we're not going to find it.
It's buried with Roy Sr. And that's where it rests, and that's where it'll always stay.
There was a time when playing collegiate sport was incredibly dangerous and people were getting killed. And Teddy Roosevelt plays a role in the development of rules, actually really the development of the NCAA, to try and make it a safer sport. But as college sports grew, the crowds got bigger and bigger, and ticket sales went up, and popcorn sales went up, and hot dogs and cheerleaders and pom-poms. And I think what you have as we move into the 70s, the 80s, and 90s is the realization that college sports is a really big business.
I've always been a little bit in opposition to things that the NCAA has done. A little bit too money hungry and not enough geared up to the kids who are playing the game to do what's best for the players and coaches and not what's going to be best for bringing in money.
The NCAA is so rigid and entrenched that they can't bring themselves or allow themselves to reverse a decision, even if it seems unjust or ridiculous.
You know, when you're talking basketball and football, it's a whole different ballgame. Those two sports are so different from the non-revenues, and I think lacrosse has done a great job in the last 20 years. The best thing to me about covering the non-revenues, the college lacrosse, college hockey, soccer, wrestling, the fact that it's clean, or, you know, as clean as it's going to get, and I love that.
Listen, the fact that the NCAA can take away a championship, I think we all know that they can do much of what they want. You know, you got to play by the rules, and again, I don't know, you know, what went on, so I don't know what rules were or were not broken. I know this, I know we live in a day and age where you got to cross your T's and dot your I's and mind your P's and Q's in every way, shape, or form, not just you know, in how you recruit, not just in how you run your practices. I mean, it's everywhere in our society, and you know, it goes on with the NCAA, it goes on with parents, it goes on with administrators, it goes on with coaches. You know, I just think sports have changed, and quite frankly, sports are very complicated now, and being a coach is very complicated now. You know, and you gotta work really hard to be above reproach now, because anybody can say anything at any time, and that's a hard thing to. That's a hard environment to work with for any coach, whether it's college, club, high school, pro. I mean, we all got to follow the rules, but we're all in a very challenging environment, that's for sure.
Would Syracuse probably like, as a collective program like the NCAA, to reverse it and say, okay, after decades and decades of looking into this and we're comfortable now acknowledging you? Yes.
I don't see them relenting, but if they did, I think Friends of Syracuse Lacrosse would find it. And they'd glue it down right there.